Greetings all, this is Management 430, Human Resource Management, and this brief lecture is going to cover some of the very basics of employee safety law, specifically what OSHA and NIOSH require of organizations. We'll just do some highlights, nothing major. We'll get into more issues around safety, including stress management and repetitive movement injuries, much later when we deal with a future module. But this one will just cover briefly an explanation of the OSHA laws. Workplace safety laws are designed to create employee well-being, and well-being is making sure that they are safe, that they are healthy, that they're satisfied with their jobs, and that they are engaged with the workplace. So well-being is a more well-rounded concept. It does affect things like productivity and employee effectiveness, and it can be a really good recruiting tool if you can argue that your workers are safe, that you have high safety standards, that people are satisfied and engaged. So you can use your good, healthy culture, safety culture, as a good recruiting tool when you want to bring in. Nobody wants to work in a place where they're at risk for getting hurt because the company is lazy and does not want to do the work to make sure they keep their workers safe. So being able to do that by making sure that we've got good safety standards is really important. Obviously, there's more than just, accidents that can happen at work, like falling into a machine or being injured by something. There are a lot of different aspects of safety, which we will absolutely get into, which can create some difficulties for people, right? But we will get into that later. But right now, the focus on wellness means that all of our employment laws regarding workplace safety are about ensuring that our workers are productive and safe and healthy, and that in doing that, they are in a better place to continue to be productive for the organization. There are two entities that you need to be aware of. One is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which establishes and monitors workplace safety standards. They make sure that we have a safe and healthy work environment for people. They set standards, and even if they don't have standards set for certain types of novel work situations or novel technologies, they will enforce the importance of making sure organizations legally keep their workers safe. That is the most important thing to learn and to take away from this module on safety law, because even if we don't have standards set up, which is what NIOSH does, they do the research and they try to set the standards to help organizations and employers to set up a good safety programs. And so they are the ones that do the research and make the recommendations. And OSHA sets the standards with NIOSH's help, and then that information gets communicated out to employers where workplace safety standards are held accountable. But even if there isn't a policy, you are obligated to keep your workers safe, to make a good faith effort to not ask them to work unsafely. And I will tell you that if you ask your employees to work unsafe, to knowingly bypass safety protocols that are in place, you could be liable for murder because you told your workers to not work safely, and then they got injured or they died on the job. There have been cases where when an employee worked unsafely at the demand of the organization and its managers have been held liable for murder. So not something you want to dangle with. Now, that doesn't happen often, and in fact, it's rarity, but it does happen. So it should be a cautionary tale to ensure that whatever you do, it's never about asking people to bypass safety protocols. The protocols are in place for a reason, and then everybody needs to behave accordingly. OSHA monitors accidents, injuries, fatalities, illnesses, all sorts of things, and it even keeps track of near misses. And you want to keep track of near misses because near misses are an opportunity to learn about what went right and what went wrong. So even if you were lucky enough to not have a major incident, there's always the possibility that a major incident could occur. So you want to make sure you're tracking and monitoring those near misses. Now we can do hazard analysis in an organization, and hazard analysis is about going out and identifying where there are potential hazards and making sure that people are aware of those potential hazards so there are no accidents. And then there's accident investigation, which is a separate category, and accident investigation is about investigating what happened after an accident happens. Hazard analysis is about trying to find the issues and concerns before, and the accident analysis is about investigating what happened and why after the fact. There are a number of antecedents to a good, safe organization and having good safety outcomes. And that focuses on safety behavior. And there are several safety behaviors. One is safety compliance, making sure we're following the rules and the regulations. The next is safety participation behavior. It's the willingness of people to support safety for themselves and for their coworkers and to stand up and make sure that they are safe. And usually supervisors and coworkers can observe that and they can evaluate that and say how safe is this individual when it comes to working. Safety knowledge is making sure everybody understands what they need to do to stay safe and how to protect themselves, so they understand all the safety protocols that go with a particular job. Safety motivation is how motivated people are to behave safe. The lower the motivation, and then that could be because of disengagement and all sorts of dissatisfaction issues. But the lower the motivation to do it, the higher that you're likely to have accidents. And then safety climate is the environment in which people feel like safety matters and the importance of how important safety is and is reinforced in the company culture. So it's the safety climate, the safety culture. Either way, it means the same, gets at the same thing. And also, embedded in this are things like aggression and bullying in the workplace. These are all workplace safety issues as well because they can result in injuries and accidents and a lot of stress. And these are all aspects of workplace safety in organizations. So we need to monitor the physical environments to make sure that the environments don't have hazards. And as I said, when we are doing hazard analysis, we're looking at things like the physical environment and what's going on. What kind of controls are in place to protect people, and are they adequate? What kind of stressors are involved in the organization? And so when we are doing hazard analysis, we're looking at how stressed our workers are because we know that stress can lead to accidents and stress can also lead to workplace illness, workplace injury, and also an unhealthy environment for the employee. We want to make sure we've got good safety officers who are conscientious about workplace safety and they're monitoring those things, and then having a safety committee that includes employees so they have a voice in making sure that they feel safe, as well as any other kind of safety executives or officers in the company. We want to have people who are tasked with ensuring our workers stay safe. Now, not all organizations have a safety officer, and those that do are more likely to have a safe environment. So we do want to make sure that we've got a situation where there are safety officers in place that are monitoring potential hazards and then investigating accidents after the fact. You can actually get a degree in workplace safety management. And I think Indiana State is a school that actually has a really good program or had a really good program in that. It's been a few years since I investigated, so I'm sure not much has changed, but it's important to note. And it's not necessarily that it falls under human resource management. Now, human resources is supposed to make sure people get trained, that people have the appropriate communications, but HR is not responsible directly for workplace safety when there's a workplace safety officer and committee involved. HR can play a role in that, but it doesn't fall under them 100%. In fact, it's a part of their responsibility, but it's not the primary part of their responsibility. When you have a workplace officer, safety officer, and you have a safety committee, these are the ones that take on the primary responsibility for that. And it may be under HR or it may be very separate from HR. It depends on the company's structure. So what do those regulations and compliance issues look like? Well, employers that have more than 10 employees must maintain their safety records with OSHA, which means they have to track all sorts of recordable events, including fatalities, injuries, and illnesses. And an illness, I don't mean like a cold, but I mean somebody got exposed to something and they got ill, or they got cancer, or they got a disease because of their exposure at work. That's the kind of illnesses we're talking about, not like, oh, I caught a cold and I passed it on to my colleagues. That's not a workplace safety issue. That's just normal manners and good appropriate behaviors, but that doesn't fall under OSHA. OSHA, contrary to a lot of people's beliefs, does provide employers with all sorts of support. They answer questions, they can provide trainings, they can help set up regulations and guidelines, they will inspect organizations, sometimes by surprise, sometimes proactively, sometimes they're invited in to make sure that the workplace is safe, and it does provide good support. Now, I believe OSHA's budget's been cut, obviously, in the most recent year, the last 9 months or so since Trump came into office. So some of that may stretch OSHA further than they're able to do, but in the past, they've always been able to go in and support organizations to the best of their abilities to ensure that everybody understands what workplace safety is about and making sure that it's all set up accordingly. It helps organizations set up workplace preparedness plans. Now, state-level agencies can do this as well. The state of Illinois has a safety agency that you can go to who works very hard to help you to set up emergency preparation. So crisis management, those kinds of things all fall under workplace safety. If you have a live shooter event, fire safety events, hurricane and tornado events, depending on where you live, and all those emergency plans fall under workplace safety issues. OSHA spells out the rights of workers to make sure that our workers are going to be as safe as is possible, to make sure we've got good guidance in place to know what we can and cannot do, and also ensuring that even if we don't have really clear standards, that they remind employers that they have to make a good faith effort to keep their employees safe. There are a number of other aspects that also fall under OSHA standards regarding ergonomics and office design. How desks are set up, the level of lighting that there needs to have, fresh air coming through, people having problems with repetitive motion injuries, from using a mouse or a keyboard. Are they sitting properly? Do they have the proper back support? Those sorts of things. Open offices without cubicles is an interesting trend, but it removes a lot of privacy. So even though there may be a trend that has some positive aspects to it, in terms of some communal connection with people, it also doesn't provide people with senses of privacy. And it can feel more chaotic and noisy. So that can also create a problem for workplace safety if there's a lot of distraction involved. There's overlap with cybersecurity because, again, we want to keep our employees safe. We want to make sure that in doing that, their data is safe so that they are not at risk for any kind of health breaches, health health information breaches or personal information breaches or identity theft or things like that. So, needless to say, this is a new consideration about what falls under the scope of workplace safety, and this doesn't necessarily fall under the legal definitions of workplace safety in OSHA, but it should fall under the umbrella because we do need to keep our employees' data safe. So that's kind of how how it embraces that definition a little bit more broadly.